someone I knew, and it is often the case for guys. You don't usually open up when you're sitting over together over a table for coffee. You open up when you have your hands on something and you're building something together. And after a little while, I started to open up a little bit about my family, some of the challenges and struggles that I had. And he started to open up a little about his family, telling me about how his dad essentially abandoned him at a really young age. And then he said something that for years I have not forgotten to this day. He was telling me that his dad left him and his mom and his family. And even though his dad left him and really wasn't much of a part of his life for years and for years, he still couldn't get his dad out of his head. And this is what he said. He said, my dad, and his dad had passed away since then, my dad has been gone for 30 years, and I am still trying to please him. Wow, that hit me right in the heart. Many of us here today, we come from good families and healthy families, and that is something to be so thankful for. There are some of us here today who come from difficult spaces. We grew up with difficult backgrounds, and we find ourselves running from those backgrounds. We find ourselves not wanting to remember or think about what happened back then, or we find ourselves just never even dreaming going back to those spaces because of what happened or what exists back there. For most of us, the truth is we probably find ourselves somewhere in between all of that. Environments where good, well-meaning people are trying to make sense in an honest way of the world, but also carrying a legacy of brokenness in what they do and how they behave and how they live, coming from expectations that were too high, sometimes coming from aspirations that were too low, or affection that rarely ever showed itself. If that was only a curse that found itself in the parent-child relationship. But the truth is, harsh words between siblings, unexpected character breaks between cousins, or the uneasy question of whether in a spousal relationship, if that first love is really still there. Sometimes those kind of things, they hit home for us in a really personal way. Family is so critical. Family is critical. When working right, it protects. It shapes us for good. It gives us an identity. It gives us a place where we can call home. But when family is broken, the break seems to have a bigger impact. So big that sometimes we end up carrying the pain with us for decades long after the one who brought it has been gone. But friends, what if there was a way not to perfect the family, but to bring beauty to the family even when the family is broken? And here's what I really want to explore with you today. What if there was something that we could give in those broken spaces, even when we feel like we have given so much in those broken spaces? Well, today we're about halfway through a series called Centering on Jesus. And we've been in the book of Colossians, this really beautiful letter from the Apostle Paul to a small up-and-coming church. And we've been exploring things like, what does it mean to be formed as a person? Or what does it mean to be freed from legalism? Or what does it mean to experience the kind of grace that changes us? But what does it look like to be centered on Jesus? What does that look like when the environments where we are most vulnerable, when the people who know us best also know our flaws, When those kind of environments, when being around those kind of people, when that doesn't feel conducive to that kind of centering that we've been talking about the past few weeks. Because so often we can't be who we want to be when dad is dragging us down. When kids who know all of our flaws are constantly reminding us of those flaws. When a wife always seems to be pointing out the bad. Or when a husband is never emotionally there. But what if those spaces that seem to be holding us back were also strangely opportunities for a greater kind of freedom? One where we could become who we were meant to be, truly who we were meant to be. And what if the hard spaces were invitations to build into our very souls in ways that we never dreamed of? Well, hey, if that's out there, then this question that we're going to zero in on today, it's worth exploring today. It's worth weighing and taking seriously. How can we become the people we were meant to be when our closest relationships often pull us the other way? Well, for some of the first Christians, the question of family, it wasn't something trivial. It wasn't a side question. It wasn't a side matter. The family was a place where centering on Jesus could fully take shape. It was also a place where the realities of relationship made that really difficult. It made it really hard. So let's take a look at this very personal, but just a heads up, also a very difficult passage from the book of Colossians. Colossians chapter 3, starting at verse 18, says this: "Wives, submit to your husbands, as is fitting in the Lord. Husbands, love your wives and do not be harsh with them. Children, obey your parents in everything, for this pleases the Lord. Fathers, do not embitter your children, or they will become discouraged. Slaves, obey your earthly masters in everything, and do it not only when their eye is on you and to curry their favor, but with sincerity of heart and reverence for the Lord. Whatever you do, work at it with all of your heart, as working for the Lord, not for human masters, since you know that you will receive an inheritance from the Lord as a reward. It is the Lord you are serving." Wives, submit to your husbands. Slaves, obey your masters. Before we go anywhere, we need to acknowledge how heavy those words are and how often they have been used to argue that Christianity is outdated and sometimes even harmful. Let's start with slavery. Slavery in the Roman world, we'll just hit some points briefly. It was not identical to the race-based chattel slavery of the southern United States in the 18th century. It offered the opportunity to be purchased from freedom. Often slaves in the Roman world held positions of high esteem, like architect or doctor. At the same time, the Roman system of slavery was also evil, and it could be very brutal to people too. And the truth is, the New Testament does not give a simple statement like, overturn the system. We don't see that anywhere in the writings of Paul or the Gospels. At the same time, Paul tells slaves, if they can become free, they should be free. He also says in a later letter in the book of a small little book called Philemon, a personal letter to a master, he encourages that master to release his slave Onesimus, who later church history tells us becomes one of the leaders of the local church in that area. And lastly, this is probably one of the most overlooked ideas or concepts in this whole difficult conversation. In the church, when slaves and masters came together at the same table, when they prayed together, when they practiced the foot washing love of Jesus together, that was absolutely radical. That was totally different. It did not dismantle the system, but it planted a different kind of reality within the household there. What was happening when master and slave would come to assemble in the same place where love and dignity was restored is that it was doing something so powerful that it couldn't just stay when they gathered. It had to pour out back into the household outside of the church assembly. Systems, they need to change. They have to change. Paul is not giving permission for us to ignore that. But systems can change while hearts remain untouched. And when that happens, the same brokenness and pain, when that doesn't happen, when systems only change, the same brokenness and pain, they continue to reign. And they just find new ways to survive and thrive underneath the surface when hearts aren't actually transformed. There's a deeper revolution that Jesus promised when Jesus gets inside of people's hearts. When that happens, systems built on domination can't continue to take their hold. Wives, submit to your husbands. Those words carry their own weight. And for some, terrible memories and real justified pain. So before even looking at the views on this, we should say this clearly. This passage should never be used to excuse abuse, coercion, intimidation, or harm. The Bible may speak to people who endure unjust suffering, but it never blesses the sin of the person who causes it. Never. So before we even talk about that, let's be really clear up front. When some people look at a passage like this, some well-meaning Christians read this along with a similar passage in Ephesians and conclude that while Christians are called to submit to one another with mutuality, marriage still includes an ordered responsibility. A husband bears a particular burden for sacrificial leadership, and a wife's submission is understood as a willing act of devotion to Christ. Not silence, not inferiority, or the loss of her wisdom or voice. We should be honest, though. In real marriages, this can raise some really hard questions, especially when the wife seems wiser or clearer or better equipped in a particular situation. At the same time, some would say that what doesn't make sense is exactly why it makes sense. God gives us chances to trust Him when it doesn't seem like the surface is clearly understandable, to have bigger belief in those moments. And some people holding to the classical view would view this as an act of devotion. At the same time, there are other Christians who would say that Paul is already transforming the household structure from within. When you compare this chapter and these verses to other very similar, what's called household codes in the Roman world at the time, there are some real surprising differences there. Paul addresses wives, children, and slaves as disciples. He places heavy obligations on slaves and masters. He makes the powerful accountable to God. So these people ask, Could Paul be meeting a culture where it was at and pressing it towards something more? So, Christians trying to take the Bible seriously have not all landed in the same place on some of these verses. Some emphasize an enduring pattern of ordered responsibility. And then there are others who emphasize a redemptive trajectory within a fallen cultural system. But both, at their best, are asking this question: what does it mean for Jesus to reshape power, love, and self-giving in the home? And both, at their best, are wrestling with these tensions together, growing in Jesus-centered love for one another. But wherever you land on these difficult and challenging subjects, I don't want to lose a central tension with that one word that comes up, that word submit, a tension that we all face and experience in all of our situations. It's true and relevant to each one of us. Because here's the part that none of us can avoid: whether the relationship is marriage, whether the relationship is parenting, childhood, friendship, church, work, submission could feel like the worst thing that we would ever have to do. In the fall of 2015, the Michigan Wolverines were playing their in-state rival, Michigan State. They were leading, and the clock was bleeding out in the football game. They were getting ready to punt the ball, and all they had to do was punt and protect. The game was theirs. So the ball went back to the punter. The punter didn't catch the ball. Instead, he dropped it. A Michigan State player came. He scooped it up for the touchdown in the last few seconds. Game over. Well, during that game, there was a moment that became a meme that was memorialized, maybe for all time. Who knows? We'll see. But it represented an action that has been common in the sporting world for generations, but has only recently gotten its name, and it's called Surrender Cobra. You can see you put your arms up on your head. You got the cobra wings here. Surrender Cobra. What just happened? The Surrender Cobra is the white flag of surrender when your team is losing. I love that name. This poor guy. A meme was born, an action was born, but it captured a core emotion. We don't like to lose. We don't like to lose. And submission feels like losing is at the very heart. It's at the heart of that very thing. Losing it feels like it's at the very heart of submission. My dad had just gotten out of the hospital after a really tough accident years back, and I was charged kind of with helping him out for a little bit, taking care of meals. I also had a trip planned, and I was getting ready to travel, and I was running right up to the deadline, so things had to move. I was getting ready to prepare him lunch. I had about a half an hour left before I needed to go, and my dad asked me to water his flowers. And I know it sounds like not a big deal, but he had a lot of flowers. And I'm like, the meal or the flowers? Are you going to eat or not? And he's like, flowers. And I'm thinking, like, you just had an accident. Do the flowers really matter right now in this moment? And yeah, the flowers mattered to him in that moment. And there was a part of me internally that was at war because I couldn't imagine doing that thing for him instead of doing what I thought he needed. I couldn't see it on my own terms. And giving in to me in that moment, it would have felt like admitting that this was the right thing for him in that moment. When I was like, for me, it was common sense that it wasn't the best thing to put my energy into that. It's not that we are bad submitters. It's that we're protectors. And protecting is a good thing. When we find ourselves in those points of tension with family, we're protecting time. We're protecting what makes sense. And we are protecting our dignity. And those things matter, especially dignity. Dignity matters. We throw around this expression sometimes, being treated like a doormat. And we often throw around that expression when we lose our sense of choice, our sense of decision, our ability to choose what's best with our time, our resources, and our actions. And being relieved or having those choices taken away from us, it makes us feel like we're losing, sometimes like we're losing a sense of our humanity when we have to forego our ability to choose, or even when we're forced into the place where we have to choose, where we have to make a choice about whether we get to choose. Submission is often letting go of a choice. It's missing roads for greater opportunities. It's sometimes going down roads where it looks like there might be poor results, or the results seem less certain. It sometimes feels like you're saying, or you're accepting somebody saying to you that your decision is less valuable. And it's really hard to separate that from the saying that you're less valuable in those moments too. The submission is not just saying, I give in. It's actually saying something deeper than that. It's saying, I am willing to become vulnerable. Vulnerable. But did you notice that very concept it's all over this passage? Children are called to obey. Well, and that's right on the surface, okay? But did you see this other one? This one actually hits close to home for me. Fathers, do not embitter your children. The ESV renders it a different way. Fathers, do not provoke your children. You think that if you had a problem and you admitted it in advance, that you'd just go away. Before I ever had kids, I said to my wife, this verse is going to be a problem for me. Because I love to tease. I love to poke. And I said it to her before we ever moved out here. I said it, this is going to be a problem for me. And I maybe said it with some hope and aspiration that getting it out there would make it not a problem, and it was still a problem. And it just so happens that God gave me a daughter that does not like to be teased. My very first child. Dad, I hate your jokes. I've heard that phrase more than anything in my house. Look, God loves playful parents. But God has been challenging me a little bit more lately to hold back words, to hold back a good tease, and even to hold back the perfect poke. Like, we're talking 75% of the time it doesn't work, but I'm growing in there. And I feel like it's important because the words that come out of my mouth, they're not about me. And maybe more importantly, it's not about the way that I think that it should be always. But is it only what we hold back? Is that the only way that we express submission? And then we come back to this one. Husbands, love your wives. Husbands, love your wives. That word love in the original language, many of you are familiar with it. It's commonly spoke. It's agape. And it simply means love. I often like to use the expression affection to translate that word instead, because sometimes in Christian circles, it can start to sound emotionless. And to be clear, biblical love is never emotion only, but it is not less than affection either. It's what happens when the heart makes much of someone and gives itself generously. And this is not only physical affection. This is not only sacrificial providing. For many, not all, but for many people, the harder form of love is actually giving themselves emotionally. The common stereotype of men is, not all men, sometimes women too, but a common stereotype for men is that they don't feel emotions, right? That's an exaggeration. And the truth is that men do feel emotions. They feel great disappointment when their child says something like, Dad, I hate your jokes, you know? The thing is that for a lot of people, it's just not always on the surface what they feel or what they think. And hear me out. What's going on the inside is often protected. It's often protected. It's behind so many layers of protection, in fact, that sometimes it's not just protected from the one that you're having a conversation with, it's protected from yourself. You don't even want to know what you think. And there's that word again, protection. And that's one of the reasons that many relationships fizzle, because one side is vulnerable and only one side takes what's inside and gives it generously. That, my friends, is a deep vulnerability in relationships. It's easier just to say, I'm not thinking about anything, or I'm not feeling anything, than to spend a minute, dig in a little bit, and really ask yourself, well, what am I thinking? What am I feeling? And to invite someone into your fears, your worries, your hopes, your aspirations. Affection, too, is a form of submission. It's a form of submission. It's saying, I will lower my walls and open myself up to you. Well, how could this be? How can submission in family be a path forward when we know that those closest so often feel like the people who are most holding us back? The ones leading us into places that we don't like. The ones keeping us from going the places we feel we should be. And that raises real tensions in this conversation. And there's really no simple answer. But what if submission wasn't just about giving in, giving up, surrender cobra? As crazy as it is it possible that submission is a way to overcome that urge to protect that can sometimes be so loud that it keeps us from going forward? Could submission be the way that connects us closer to Jesus, the one who leads us to an inner kind of life that's truly free? And could embracing submission, could it be a way that we lead? A month ago, I discovered a new set of trails 5 minutes from my house. And I love finding new trails. Even new trails that will require me to be married to my GPS because there's so many turns and twists. And so we discovered Wasserman Park and Merrimack. I knew of the park. I didn't know there was a bunch of trails there. We went out there with the kids and we went hiking, and they ran ahead of me. And we quickly discovered that my third oldest child, is that how you say it? My third child really liked to be in front. And when the older kids would get in front of him, he would make his anxiety clearly known about it. So we were about done with the hike, and I decided, all right, let's pause for a moment. Let's game plan, rendezvous, kids. What if we took turns leading? We could start with the youngest. Every time we hit a fork in the trail, then we could flip, and the next one could go in front, and the next one. And thankfully, they bought in. They bought into the plan. And so we went along our plan. And my oldest child was kind of rehearsing the order. And she was saying, okay, this person's going to go first. This person's going to go first. This person's going to go next. And then it's Dad. And when's Dad going to go? Actually, she raised the question to my second oldest. And she really didn't give time for anyone to answer. She said this, oh, Dad never leads. I just smiled. I'm sitting there in the back, and every time we come to a fork, where are we supposed to go? Everybody slows down, they pause, and they wait for Dad with the GPS. Like to tell them where we're gonna go. I never lead, I thought. Not exactly. I lead from behind. When we lead from behind, we have a greater impact. We may not be at the front of the line, but we shape the ones who are. With a steady presence, a confidence, and an open heart. And when people at the front of the line are shaped by people at the back of the line, they are shaped by a loving presence. And their steps become slower. Their steps become wiser. And the strange thing is that our voice matters more to them than it would matter if it was forced, because it becomes more precious. It becomes more valued. It becomes more relied on. When we lead from behind, we have a greater compass. Dad, are we going to go left or are we going to go right? Are we going to go straight? Don't let the decisions up front fool you. Let's not let those decisions that are happening up there make us think wrong about this. Paul teaches this principle in this passage out of reverence for Christ. Out of reverence for Christ. When we center on Christ, some options do close to us, but many, many pathways open to us. Decisions feel less fragile. The future feels more open because many, many spaces can be entered into with reverence for Christ. That's the pathway, and that's the primary way. Less this way, this way, this way. Many of those ways can be taken. Christ is at the center. And that leads to the last one. When we lead from behind, we have greater security. If our hearts react out of protection mode only, we limit our lives. If we never step into uncertain places because they are uncertain, we close off good vistas. If we never take a step with people because they might fail or they might fall, we never allow ourselves to grow with them. And we close ourselves off to the opportunity to forgive them. And that is important. That's important, friends, because forgiveness is not just something that we do, it's something that we have to practice and something that we have to grow in. So we're not just limiting them, we're limiting us. And when we lead from behind, truly from the heart and not just from the lips only, there's something actually different about us. We can enter into spaces differently. It may look like we've given up our choice, but we are beholden to no one. We are living under no one's expectations. Our very souls are free. And that's what submitting to one another not only brings to the family, it brings to us within the family. It's because in that context, it can be very confusing and very difficult and very challenging for so many reasons and all the complex dynamics that are associated with it. It's in that context we can become better servants, centered on Jesus, not enslaved to the fear of what might be. When we lead from behind, we lead free. So friends, imagine with me what this could actually look like in our lives. Fathers who aren't just in command, but followed because they gave generously, sharing their feelings, talking about their faults, and refusing to protect themselves from the ones that they love. Older brothers saying to younger sisters, why don't you choose the game this time? Or why don't you just choose the game? Wives telling mother-in-laws, you matter to us, and your voice is welcome here. What would that do to our families if we caught a vision to outsubmit each other? And what would that do to us? What if leading from behind made us less afraid, less attached to things, and more open to Christ at work in our lives and families? And how could that shape us as a church, where we were filled not just with more people, but with more families, shaping families who found the front of the line wasn't as attractive as it used to be, who were more prepared to face difficulties because they had practiced becoming the kind of people who don't need to win every room in order to be faithful in every space. A church where husbands and wives and parents and children, single adults and widows and older saints and younger saints learn to say, how can I use what I have for your good? Not because we're weak, not because we don't have opinions, not because truth doesn't matter, but because Jesus has made us secure enough to stop protecting ourselves all of the time. And maybe that's one of the quiet miracles of submission. It loosens the grip of fear. It teaches us that we don't have to be first to be loved. We don't have to be the loudest to matter. We don't have to be in control for Christ to be present. Friends, the one who came to save us did not save us from the front line. He saved us so that we didn't have to be always in the front of the line. He himself did not come grasping, demanding, proving, or protecting himself. He came low and giving himself away. He showed us where true life is really to be found. Leading from behind is it's not abandoning what matters most. It's picking it up again. And that's where freedom is found. Let's pray.